Good afternoon. My name is Rob Cook, and I am the Executive Director of Ontario Racing, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar, the first of what will be many opportunities over the next 8 weeks to talk about a long-term funding agreement for our industry and to solicit your opinions and feedback. The long-term funding elements we're going to talk about in today's webinar are a starting point. They're not an ending point. Your input will help shape what the end point looks like, and we need to hear from people that view this long-term funding framework from both a positive and a negative perspective. But I would like to suggest that if there are elements people don't like, we need to hear from you in terms of what would be a suitable suggestion for change. So think of today as step one, an opportunity for us to convey information to you in advance of the rest of the consultation process, which we will be talking about a little bit later. We will entertain a limited number of questions at the end of today's presentation. You can type your questions on the screen, and we'll address those at the end. We are providing this webinar from the Ontario Racing office, and I have with me representatives from Ontario Lottery and Gaming and the Woodbine Entertainment Group to assist and help answer any questions. So I would like to emphasize that this is a proposal we're going to talk about today. Nothing is set in stone. It does provide a roadmap and a framework for you to comment on. We know the industry needs long-term certainty, and this could be a step towards that. I should caution or point out that we don't have all the answers and the details right now. We hope to have more in the short term, and above all, we hope to put in place a structure that going forward can get those answers and complete the details. So we are conscious of your time today. We will be respectful of that. We have over 180 people registered and online for the webinar. So let's start. So in way of a little bit of background, Ontario Racing is the successor of ORIA and the new industry association for horse racing in the province. Ontario Racing is recognized by government, including the AGCO and OLG, as the voice of the industry with a mandate assigned by the Premier to advocate on behalf of the horse racing industry and to work for a sustainable future for horse racing in this province. Ontario Racing will be leading the consultation process with the industry on a long-term funding framework and agreement, and as I mentioned, this is the first step. So Ontario Racing has had recent changes that people may be interested in. The ORIA board has now transitioned to become a new interim board of directors at Ontario Racing to provide a strong industry perspective and to direct association affairs. Michael Keegan and John Snowden have stepped down as directors, with thanks from all of us for their hard work and dedication. The new interim board has struck a governance committee to work with legal experts to determine a new permanent and representative board structure. That new structure will be in place in early 2017. So let's talk about the long-term funding framework or roadmap. The objective of the exercise is to create a long-term funding model for live horse racing in the province. To date, the primary effort and task has been engaging with partners in government, at the OLG, and at the Woodbine Entertainment Group to create a foundation for a more stable and sustainable horse racing industry. Industry self-determination, transitioning from looking at horse people as stakeholders to shareholders, has been a primary element of the proposed roadmap. We're here today to share the details of the next steps to determine what a long-term funding framework could look like. The focus is on how public funds in the long term can be invested in the horse racing industry so that they will have the greatest long-term economic impact. So we'll talk a little bit about the key pieces of the roadmap going forward. The roadmap is intended to create a situation where evidence-based decision-making occurs. Those decisions are informed by metrics that drive growth and sustainability to the business. It's a way to frame investments and determine that they are the right investments for the long term. We need to get long-term funding certainty so that tracks and horse people can make breeding, capital, racing program, and hiring decisions. Over time, the objective is to have less reliance on public funds, and over time, to grow the industry itself over targets that will be established as part of the agreement. The intent is to utilize Woodbine Entertainment Group expertise in alliance management and their experience in marketing to be leveraged as well to improve product and grow wagering across the industry. The concept envisions a single transfer payment agreement so that funding can be invested across the entire sector to derive the greatest impact. And it should be clear that this is not about maintaining the status quo. There will be challenging conversations about the changes needed to create a sustainable industry going forward. So the long-term funding framework itself, it's based on 4 key principles. Firstly, that there would be a new Racetrack Alliance established. All Ontario racetracks that conduct live racing will be invited to join and create a new alliance. It is proposed that the Woodbine Entertainment Group will serve as the administrator of this new alliance. The second objective is to have longer term and more predictable funding, which we will come to, and that's based on the need of the Ontario racing industry to invest in their businesses and have certainty beyond 2021. It's based on ongoing accountability and transparency, decision-making based on evidence, and agreed upon success indicators over the long term as well. And it's premised also on industry leadership, or maybe phrased industry self-determination. We need to have racetrack business plans for race dates, purse levels, everything to be aligned across racetracks in a coordinated approach. And Ontario Racing will play a key industry leadership role into the future. So let's talk a little bit about the Racetrack Alliance as it's proposed. The Alliance would be an incorporated Ontario not-for-profit corporation, different than the current Standardbred Alliance, which is more loosely formed. The new Alliance would be governed by a board of directors comprised of representatives from the Alliance membership. WEG will be responsible for the management and the administration of the Racetrack Alliance, leveraging their expertise in operating the existing Standardbred Alliance. There would be a funding agreement created between OLG and the Racetrack Alliance for the full amount of government funding annually. The Alliance would then work together to create a racing program with final approval required by the Ontario Racing Board of Directors. A little bit about the length of term. So the framework or the roadmap as it's proposed currently is designed to provide the industry with the certainty that I think we all agree is needed for breeding, buying capital, and other types of business investments. The proposal would be, following 2021, an initial 7-year term for an agreement with 2 additional 5-year extensions based on performance measures, and would total obviously 17 years. So to reframe it, the existing TPAs will carry through to 2019. The government has committed to a 2-year extension of those TPAs, including enhanced HIP, to get us to 2021. The framework, as we're discussing today, is envisioned to start in 2021. Could it be sooner? Could this framework actually come in place in 2019 or a sooner date? That is a possibility, and that is certainly something that the consultations with the industry, we would love to hear people's opinion on that possibility. So I mentioned the extensions as the agreement is currently formed. They are going to be based on performance measures and contract compliance. At the end of the day, public money invested into our industry needs to show that it's invested wisely, that it's helping to create sustainability, and that it's creating value for not only our industry, but the Ontario taxpayer that's investing the money as well. So how much money are we talking about? The number could be $93.4 million. which is a reflection of the current contribution from government into our industry. So this would be from 2021 to 2038, the potential that $93.4 million would be available. I should point out that I mentioned earlier there is an objective that over time the support of our industry with public dollars diminishes as the industry grows, wagering grows, other products and other opportunities come along to increase the financial support. So it isn't all about a $93.4 million government commitment over the time period, but it is about sustaining the industry and helping the industry replace that money, that public money, through growth and other investments. I should point out as well, some people certainly ask this question, the numbers that we're talking about in terms of dollars, the frame, the time frame, 17 years, these are proposals. They've been authorized enough to come to you to talk about, but we should all realize this is subject to a negotiated final agreement. That final agreement will require the approval by government and cabinet at the end of the day. So it is a framework to talk about. There is an agreement to come, and there is an approval process as well with government to come as well. So let's talk about industry leadership and cohesiveness. I mentioned earlier there would be key performance measures and key performance indicators that would include, amongst other things, wagering targets. So the details of how this framework would work are based on evidence-based numbers, they're based on targets, and they're based on consequences of meeting the targets or not meeting the targets. There would be cost allocation agreements to ensure shared administrative efficiencies for racetracks. There would be annual business plans from racetracks that would be required. There would be the requirement for a pari-mutuel wagering revenue sharing agreement. And there would be requirements to report to OLG long-term, including things like 5-year strategic business plans. Ontario racing responsibilities under the framework would include organizational support for the Racetrack Alliance to help it be formed, and then reviewing and approving the Racetrack Alliance program and annual business plans. So in terms of the Racetrack Alliance creation, I just mentioned that Ontario Racing would be involved in a support role with Woodbine Entertainment Group to form the alliance. WAG will not have a majority of directors on the new alliance, but certain material decisions will require approval of WAG nominees. Obviously, WAG in performing this function would have exposures in many areas that would require a more direct decision-making process being embedded with the WAG nominees. The Racetrack Alliance, as I previously mentioned, will enter into a funding agreement with OLG for receipt of the annual funding payment. WAG would be responsible for the management and administration of the Racing Alliance pursuant to the management agreement that is negotiated. As I mentioned as well, WAG would prepare a Racetrack Alliance annual business plan, the main feature of which will be the racing program and how the OLG annual payment is being utilized. And the annual business plan would need to be approved by the Racing Alliance Board of Directors. It would then be submitted to the Ontario Racing Board of Directors for approval and subsequently to OLG and AGCO. So a comment on the foundational piece of this pathway forward, which is based on WAG's experience. So WAG has done an exceptional job. In spite of the declining horse supply, the bet per race at most Alliance standardbred tracks is increasing. With WAG's expertise, the members of the Standardbred Alliance have been able to offer sustainable racing programs and obtain increased distribution. Since the inception of HRPP, the Ontario-based wager has grown each year. Members of the Alliance are able to tap into WAG's substantial distribution network. And there are many efficiencies from an administrative perspective that have already been realized across the current Alliance. So let's talk a little bit about the next steps in all of this in terms of consultation. So as we move forward, comments and opinions can be expressed through a portal on the Ontario Racing website. The ability to access that portal and engage online will be possible throughout the consultation period. We expect to have that feature available as of November 1st. In-person consultations will be held across the province with meetings scheduled, as I will talk about very shortly. Keep checking the Ontario Racing website for any changes or additions to the meeting schedule we're going to review. And as I mentioned, this webinar is intended to provide a knowledge base for the industry to think about. There will be more information provided at the start of the consultation meeting, and then of course we need to hear from you. So really quickly, the consultation dates. After today's webcast, we start on October 31st with a meeting at the Holiday Inn at the Toronto International Airport, November 1st at Flamborough Downs in Hamilton, November 9th at Hiawatha Raceway in Sarnia, November 13th at Western Fair Raceway in London, November 16th at Rideau Carleton Raceway in Ottawa, November 19th in Port Perry at a location to be determined, and November 22nd in Milton at the Country Heritage Park. So that kind of takes us to the end of the webinar. We want to thank you for joining us. The next steps are the important steps because your feedback's important in this process. In addition, if people would like to talk to a representative of Ontario Racing, we will do our best to entertain your calls or your submissions or your emails or your faxes. If it's a deluge of interactions, that might be difficult, but we will do our best. If you want to talk to us, we're quite willing to talk to you. So Gabrielle, I will ask you if there are any questions that have come in.
Hi there. So we do have a question about who will be responsible for forming the new Racing Alliance and how that will be done.
Okay, I've covered a bit of it in the webinar. The Racing Alliance will basically be formed by the Woodbine Entertainment Group with the assistance of Ontario Racing. It'll be building on the structure and the experience that currently exists under the Standardbred Alliance. I mentioned it will be a corporation, a not-for-profit corporation in Ontario without share capital and with a board of directors that is representative of the industry. And the board will have, well, it will have WEG nominees. Those WEG nominees will not be the majority of the board.
Okay, so we have a few people that are asking how this industry feedback will be incorporated into the negotiations for the funding agreement and how that feedback will be made transparent or made public.
Okay, so the process as envisioned by Ontario Racing, as we engage the industry and have a series of different types of consultations, including the webinar today, the in-person meetings that are coming forward, online portal. Our commitment is to record and consolidate all of the opinions and viewpoints heard from the industry. They will be prepared in a report. That report will be made public, and the report will be provided to Ontario Racing, Woodbine Entertainment Group, and OLG to form the basis of the negotiations for the long-term agreement, which is scheduled to happen through the winter of 2017, hopefully to be completed by March 31st, 2017.
And just to build on that a little bit, we will make that report public on our website and distribute it through our social channels and through our mailing list. So if you are not part of our mailing list, please do sign up on our website to be sure that you're up to date on all of those details. Just to go back to an earlier question, we do have a few people that are asking how the board of the Alliance will be made up. So we can answer that as well.
I think we can. That will be part of the negotiations and discussions on the legal structure of the alliance. But I think it's assumed that the alliance board will be composed of alliance members, which are essentially the racetracks. I'm not sure that the composition of the board has been set sort of in a final way. That'll be part of the discussions that OR will be participating in.
We can say that there will be representation from all three breeds and all three levels of racetracks, and we can also say that there won't be a WEG majority on the board.
Bear with us as we check our long list of questions.
Okay, so we do have a few people that are asking what other alternatives might be to this proposed framework. So it is, I will let Rob speak to this, of course, since Rob's the boss, but we do want to be clear that there needs to be a new approach to funding horse racing in Ontario. We hear every day from folks that tell us that certainty is needed, that they need that kind of certainty to make investments in their businesses. So this proposal is on the table now, and any sort of there's certainly an option for modifications to this proposal, but going back to the drawing board will certainly set us back. Rob?
Yeah, I think obviously our goal is to hopefully take this framework and make the changes and modifications that are needed to solve issues people might have. And it's been a long time getting to this, so people shouldn't expect that there's an easy alternative. It doesn't mean that this is a done deal, but certainly if this ends up not being an acceptable approach to the industry, then that creates obviously a challenge for government to find a new way. What that would look like, who knows? So I think it's, rather than focusing on the failure of this, I think we need to focus on how do we get this right? How do we make sure this does do what it needs to do going forward?
Okay, well, I do think that concludes the webinar portion of our consultations. Please be aware that this webinar has been recorded. We will post it online and again distribute it through our mailing list and our social channels. The consultation dates are available on our website. There is no need to register for those consultations. We encourage as many folks to come out as possible. We want to have the opportunity to engage as broadly as possible. And further to that, we'll have an online portal that will go live as soon as our in-person consultations begin. And we encourage everyone to access that online portal and make their feedback known in writing. And certainly all the feedback that we've received today and through the in-person consultations and also through the online portal will be incorporated into the final report. And again, that report will be made public.
So thank you everybody for joining in. Hopefully we will see all of you at one of the meetings starting in less than 2 weeks. So thank you everyone.
Thank you everyone.